name's Jessie and I'm a clinical trials nurse. I work in rare diseases at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute, and I have an interest in collaborating with families on long-term clinical trials and hope to highlight their experience of participating in long-term high-burden paediatric clinical trials. And I'm hoping to also make some suggestions on what can be done to improve patient experience in this space. Sorry, just trying to get to the next slide. There we go. Thanks. So for 7 years, I had the privilege of working with families in a clinical drug trial for achondroplasia. MCRI was the first site internationally for the facilitators trial and participated in early phase 2 studies through to international regulatory approval and wonderfully PBS listing here in Australia. Over time, as the trials nurse there, I noticed I was hearing an increased feedback in clinic about the burden of participating in the trial. This prompted me to conduct a qualitative project highlighting the experience of families, and the learnings from this can be extrapolated and are translatable across paediatric clinical trials. But to go forward, we have to take a little step back and consider why paediatric clinical trials are needed in the first place. Understandably, paediatric clinical trials have been limited due to a reluctance to conduct trials in children. This has led to the frequent off-label use of medicines in this population group. But children aren't mini adults. Legislative changes in Europe and North America now encourage paediatric clinical trials, promoting the availability of safe and effective medicines in children. In Australia, the National Clinical Trials Governance Framework is now a component of hospital accreditation, and we're working and looking forward to that here at MCRI. Quality improvement based on service and customer feedback is a key component of this framework and is a positive step towards better health outcomes for children. So the best way forward is not just to learn how to cure diseases, but to prevent people and children from getting sick in the first place. So we envision a future which prevents disease before it develops, and to remove the trial and error from treatment to ensure that all information needed to treat children can be accessed by those who need it. Precision health is the solution, aiming to prevent or delay diseases in healthy children. To achieve this, I strongly believe we need to partner with families and support their journey on clinical trials. To begin this journey, I set out to better understand the barriers and facilitators to participating in clinical trials. I did this by interviewing families who were participating in a long-term high-burden clinical trial for children with achondroplasia. Achondroplasia is the most common form of dwarfism and is a condition associated with multiple significant lifelong comorbidities, including chronic pain, sleep apnea, tibial bowing. The commercially sponsored trial that these children were participating in aimed to prevent and minimise the health impacts experienced by the children by targeting the aberrant signalling pathway at a cellular level. The trial children were eligible for enrolment in the trial from birth until they reached near final adult height. This meant for families, they were looking at a commitment of around 10 to 15 years of daily injections, additional documentation, trial assessments, and these were all in addition to their ongoing standard of care needs. This translated to a daily commitment of around 1 hour for each family and a hospital visit every month for 10 to 15 years. As families progressed in the trial, I began to receive anecdotal feedback in clinic indicating a high level of fatigue. This set me looking for best practice guidelines to support the families. And unfortunately, the literature in this area is quite limited, often focusing on recruitment and from the perspective of researchers. What I found was that experience and retention are positively correlated, which is perhaps really unsurprising. Families were motivated by a desire to mitigate future health complications such as chronic pain and surgeries. They were motivated by their experience during early childhood years, including invasive surgical procedures such as foramen magnum decompression. There was also an altruistic element to participation. Families really did want to improve the options available for other children in the future, and they expressed a hope that other children would not have to go through the same experiences their family had. Trust in the principal investigator and clinical trial team were important to families. A positive relationship that promoted trust between the clinical trial team and families were positively correlated with experience. Access to medical care and the support provided by the principal investigator and the broader clinical trial team were a positive motivator, particularly in the early childhood years, where complications were more frequent and families had a higher level of concern for the health of their child. Families appreciated the integration of clinical care and trial assessments where this was possible. Where this wasn't able to, where this was not possible, families had a limited tolerance for the repeated request to attend the hospital. This tolerance was notably decreased over time, and in the high school years, the rigidity of trial assessments became a negative factor. It was also, they were often felt to interrupt schooling and extracurricular activities, as well as social engagements. At this point, families often noted the lack of information from the pharmaceutical company, and this sentiment increased over time as families felt they had given the pharmaceutical company significant amounts of data and gone to great lengths with little communication back in return. Trial nurses were noted to play an important part balancing the competing demands of the trial along with clinical care and family needs. Rigidity and a lack of understanding in this area were negatively correlated with experience and led to poor retention. At times, families also noted where institutional barriers existed, highlighting a more integrated approach would be beneficial. Clinical trials are required to ensure the development of safe and effective medicines in children. Trial designs that value and acknowledge the contribution of families would positively impact their experience and likely result in increased participation and compliance. Above all, the families highlighted the direct impact of the relationship with the clinical trial team. This could be better supported through trial designs. So where to from here? Sites can positively impact trial design by engaging with the pharmaceutical company during the design development phase and advocating for changes at a program level to better recognise the contributions of families. Pharmaceutical companies need to be encouraged to seek feedback from specialist centres and investigators on the feasibility of trial design in this patient population. Adapting trial design for paediatric needs may include limiting invasive procedures, optimising imaging, sharing essential clinical data with treating teams, and enhanced communication between sites and sponsors. So placing families centrally within the trial design would positively impact experience and overall trial success. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you.